Welcome back to another episode of Lady Justice Talks, where curiosity meets law. Today you're here with Susu B,
Anita.
and today's episode is really special actually, not only because the topic is very not spoken of enough, which is trafficking, human trafficking, all types of trafficking, but also because we have a very special guest today, especially for our club, which is Cassandra Harvey.
Hello.
Cassandra, she's being very humble right now, but she's actually the president of Women in Law. And I'll let her introduce herself because, yeah, she has a lot beside her name.
Yeah, so I'm Cassandra. Thank you for the introduction. I'm going into my third year. I'm doing a double major in criminology and law and society with a certificate in public administration. And I am the president of the Women in Law Association, and I'm also the co-president of the Law and Society Students Association.
Wonderful.
Period.
Literally. I'm trying to keep it professional, but like literally period.
And I'm a mom. I forgot to add that.
Yeah,
and I'm a mom. Yeah.
That's a big
Two
part.
beautiful daughters.
Yes.
You're so cute.
So, Cassandra, can you, I guess we'll just get right into it.
Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about your trafficking experience?
Yeah, so I think I feel like that's such a loaded question. It's hard to kind of simplify it. I guess I'll start from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm only 26, so it's not that long, but I think how I would say I got roped into sex trafficking kind of stemmed from my childhood. So both of my mom, she had substance abuse issues. A large portion of my family was incarcerated, which led into me going into foster care at a very young age. And I think growing up in the child welfare system, I was constantly moved from home to home because I was either being abused or the home wasn't a good fit, or I was going back to my mom and back and forth.
Right.
And it wasn't until I moved to Ottawa at the time where I stayed in a foster home long term, and that was still abusive, but because I was older, it's almost like I wasn't believed in a sense by the people who were my workers and everything. So when I turned 15, I ran away from my foster home. Your typical, I would say, teen mom show. I ran away. I got pregnant at 16. And then the next 4 years I spent in a really abusive relationship and had 2 children. And then I think after that, that whole time period, even before pregnancy, when I had run away, was a very difficult time. I was involved in a lot of criminal activity. I was around the wrong type of people, and just overall, I wasn't going down a very good path until I got pregnant with my first daughter. And then once I had left the abusive relationship that I was in, I ended up meeting someone. So social media had a huge part in what had happened to me.
In a good way or a bad way?
In a bad way, because
Oh.
I think I would say I started being trafficked in 2018. So I think that time was Snapchat was really big. Instagram was really big. OnlyFans was becoming a thing. There were so many people who were kind of advertising on social media, make money with your boyfriend and do all of these things and be the ride or die type of girlfriend. Right. And that's when I really started being influenced by social media and my peers. And I was actually trafficked by 3 different people. One of who I had known for a very long time, one who I'd met on Tinder, and then the next one who I'd met through mutual friends.
I'm glad you mentioned the 3 different types, because I feel like people think of trafficking as there is a place that you would find sex or any type of trafficking in. You use social media, you use Tinder, then probably you'll, that's how you get trafficked. Don't use that. But sometimes it's just a person that you have known your entire life.
Mm-hmm. And I think too movies, I don't know if you guys have seen The Sound of Freedom. It was a movie based off of sex trafficking, and I think it's a big stereotype of when you're walking down the street, you're gonna get picked up and then kidnapped, and then you're put in sex trafficking.
That's literally how I thought about it.
Yeah, or that thing where I don't know, this went viral a lot where they mark your car.
I saw that.
I've seen people like saying like, "Oh, I will not park my car in this specific spot because probably that's how you get human trafficked."
Or, like,
and I
if
had like
they
this stereotype about human trafficking.
Yeah, like. Yeah. Like, no.
Exactly.
No, because like the first thing that I feel like comes to mind is that this like strict trafficking or like human trafficking is just like you getting kidnapped.
Right.
Yeah.
Or like that's like I feel like that's the biggest like thing that comes to mind when you like say that.
Yeah, I feel like that's bad for the media though, because you should learn that yes, you could just know someone, and obviously we'll talk more about your stories, so we'll know more details. But you could know someone and be in this relationship of trafficking. It doesn't have to be just like me walking down alone and there's, I don't know, it's dark at night
A
and
truck
then I
pulls up and, like,
kidnapped
takes you
and then
in.
I'll never see Cassandra again because she that's how I visualized it when I knew that you were a survivor of human trafficking. I thought like, oh, so like she was gone for like a period of her life. Probably she
Yeah.
was just kidnapped for a period of her life on an island or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very much, I think, and that's the biggest struggle with like trying to raise, like, well, that's what you raise awareness for
Right.
too, right? Is like sex trafficking happens in so many different ways. And I think like it's, when you're at such a young age, like I can't do the math right now, but in 2018, I would have been fairly young. I think I was 19 years old. So I was very easily manipulated. And I think too, like, people in my life at that time who had known me or kind of learned about my childhood really benefited off of the fact that I was very vulnerable. I never had anyone who loved me, and that's kind of what I was looking for, like, at the time when I had left an abusive relationship. So yeah, and then it was like, oh, like, I can help you make money because I didn't have money to pay rent and I didn't have money to buy food. And then on social media, all you see are like the girls who have like Louis Vuitton bags and like, you know, these BBLs and fake boobs and like all of these things, right? And at the time, like, that's what I thought I wanted and what I wanted life to be.
And that's expensive.
Very, yeah, and you have to find a way to make that money. So meeting the people who I did at the time, I thought that I was going to get that, but it definitely did not happen.
Right. I'm really wondering because, well, in the introduction, like, you're very involved in things with law and like everything is about really law. You're a pre-law student. So I'm wondering if this whole thing with like human trafficking was the reason why like you got involved and wanted to actually get into law.
So honestly, no. I think I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be a lawyer. I knew I wanted to do criminal defense, and it was because of the fact that growing up, I remember, I believe I was about maybe 5 or 6, and I vividly remember this. So I was with we call like them Nana and Papa. I was with my Nana, and I remember we went to No Frills, and she also had substance abuse issues, and we didn't have any food. And I remember going into No Frills, she stole food, and then she got arrested, and then we had to call my Papa to come and pick me up. And I remember her going in the back of a police car and being taken away. And I think at that moment I kind of realized, like, I know that my Nana isn't a bad person. I know she would never harm anyone. I know that she stole food because we needed food, because if we didn't have it, then I was the one who wasn't eating. And I think after that, it really made me realize how cruel the world can be and how people are very, and of course, like, that's the police job, right? To like reduce crime and to stop people and protect society. But I just think like there's so many issues and things that people should not be incarcerated for, like something as simple as like stealing a can of tuna or something from the store. And then growing up after that, being involved, like growing up in a marginalized community, and then seeing a lot of my high school friends and people who I had met after get into gang violence and start selling drugs. And I did lose a really good friend of mine at the time. He was murdered. And I think like,
I'm so sorry.
I knew, like, again, like, I knew deep down that these people really aren't bad people. We all came from the same place, and we were all trying to make it, whether that was someone going to school or someone selling drugs on the side of the street. Like, we all had different paths. And then I slowly started to see the police not do, you know, they didn't do the full investigations that they would have for someone else, because this person, it was a product of a gang, like gang violence. So, like, there's no point in looking into it because they're in a gang. And then after that, like, it just made me realize that I wanted to help people. And then I think when I started being trafficked and then when I became a victim, it was very much a different circumstance, because I think everyone who hears my story, they're like, oh my gosh, why would you go into criminal defense? Like, you want to see people free and like you want criminals out on the streets. And I think it was like looking at things from being in the position of like, you know, being classified as a victim. Right. I'm definitely a firm believer that jails don't help rehabilitate people. I think they are very, very horrible places, especially with the amount of overcrowding that's happening right now in the jails. And I just didn't believe that jail would help rehabilitate someone who did something so bad. And of course, like, the restorative justice process was never an option. Like, no Crown ever brought it up or anything. And I remember when we were going into trial, I was with the Crown and the police officers, and we were sitting there, we were starting our prep, and I had said, like, I don't want to continue. Like, this is too much for me. I think it would be best if I just if we don't continue with the trial. And then, you know, they made me aware of what would happen. Like, his charges would be stayed and he wouldn't go to jail and all of these things. And I said, I'm fully aware of what I'm doing. But again, this is something that I wanted to do. And I remember the Crown and the police had looked at me and they were like, if you don't go through with this and something like this happens to you again, the police might not believe you.
Right.
And then I started, like, it was a very, like horrible, like, first of all, you shouldn't say that to someone who's a victim of crime.
Literally.
But it was definitely, like, an eye-opening experience, because to me, I was like, you guys say I'm a victim, but I kind of feel like I'm just here for you to win a case. Because now that I'm not, the police might not believe me in the future. And, you know, hopefully nothing like that ever does happen to me in the future, but it's scary for what if there are women who go through that and it continues to happen, because many women...
they're scared to go just because, what if the police doesn't believe me in the future? Like,
yeah. And there's many women who go back to their traffickers. It took me like 4.5 years to leave my trafficker because I kept going back. So it's definitely a common issue.
Rehabilitation, because I think that's a whole thing in psychology, because I'm a psych major, so like I really just take it to that side, and I think really like this is a whole other issue that like needs another episode, like how like jail and actually it's not about punishment, it's about preparing a person to go out there and you know, do the best they can. That's how I think about it.
Yeah, and another thing that really struck me was that you said that, like, the victims keep going back to their traffickers, so it's a hard process to leave it. And I'm sure, like, we've all heard, like, that is a hard process, like, abusive relationships, abusive households, like, there's just hard to leave. But what would you say the most common challenges are that are faced by victims in such environments, like in trafficking?
Yeah, honestly, I would say, like, you know, it's funny because before it had happened, I was like, oh, if a girl's being abused, like, just leave. And then I ended up being abused for years, and I realized it's not that simple. And I think in my case, especially for sex trafficking, is traffickers will break you down emotionally and mentally and physically, and they will make you feel like you're not good enough.
You need them.
Yeah, and that too. And so what typically happens when you're being trafficked, and what happened to me was, it started off as like, okay, you'll do, so when people are sex trafficked, typically it's in hotels, Airbnbs, or something that's called like in-calls and out-calls. Out-calls are where you'll go to someone else's house. And so what started off as like, okay, there was an in-call, and the person would come in and they would pay you for a sexual service. And so once that sexual service was finished, they would leave, and then my trafficker would come back up to the room. And so prior to us, you know, like, getting involved like that, it was like, okay, I'm going to help you make money, and I'm going to help you do this because I care about you and I love you. So then after the first call, it started as, let me keep your money, because we call them tricks. If a trick comes back upstairs, they can steal all your money, so it's not safe here. So then it's like, in your head at the time, you're like, okay, yeah, like, that makes sense. I don't want someone to steal my money. But then after, you know, multiple calls, it's like, let me take the money because someone's going to steal it. And then the night ends and you don't have any money because your trafficker has taken all of your money. So then it's like, where do you go? Like, you wake up, you did all of that all night, and then you have no money. So it's very hard. And that was my thing, is I was very, very financially dependent on my trafficker at the time. Like, anything that I needed, he would buy for me. So that was my main thing, and also a trauma bond. Like I was so I think I was very much, well, what I thought at the time was that I was in love with him, and like we had a ride or die relationship, and everything he was doing was because he loved me. So that contributed to it as well. It was the trauma bond, and then on top of that, financial dependence.
That's intense.
That's
That's
yeah.
very intense. Like every time you're saying something, I'm like, okay, hopefully it will get better now. But then you just drop
No,
like
of
the
course
trauma
not.
pro
But-
max. I'm like that's very intense actually. And I think that's the thing with human trafficking. All I can think of was just like this psychology like lens that like it's one of the rare cases of like really emotion driven crimes because you're just like building this whole relationship with a person just to abuse them.
Yeah.
And doesn't even stop like financially as well. That's crazy because I thought that's again like one of the questions I had for you, and you kind of covered is like the misconceptions for like about like survivors and about human trafficking. So beside the idea that not only human trafficking does not only happen in kidnapping, but also like
It could happen anywhere.
it happened anywhere, and also money wise there's like there could be like this dependency that's going on. It's not just fully just bringing the person, okay, you're gonna be there like by force. Sometimes it's just be like, okay, like I have to do this because to survive really.
And
But
I
then,
think
oh no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think too, like as a survivor, that's what I struggled with the most, was that because I felt so complicit in what I was doing. Like I would wake up and he would pick me up and we would go to a hotel, and I felt like for so long, because I was complicit in doing that and I wasn't like dragged there or like beaten to go there, that I wasn't really trafficked.
Like-
Right.
Like it's as if you thought you had the choice, but that also like ties in with all the emotional like ways, like the manipulation, the gaslighting that they did, right?
Yeah.
So
Exactly. Gaslighting, I think, is a really good word for
yeah,
that.
gaslighting, like it was still a form of abuse, right?
Yeah. I'm wondering about like like obviously I understand that there's a lot of like emotions that come in, and you don't have to get into all of them because I understand it's really like sensitive.
Yeah.
But I'm admiring you for the fact you're out there, because I feel like a lot of survivors of many things, especially women, like really fear, like like the Me Too movement.
Yeah.
Like everyone was like so scared to like be out there and talk about their experience, but then when they found someone talking about it, they were out there. So I'm wondering how you navigated those like maybe like emotions, negative emotions. I don't know, shame maybe. And to be able to just talk about this experience without feeling like, oh, I should not be talking about it.
Yeah, I think therapy. I've been in therapy for 3 years, and I think so. Like even my therapist, she's a wonderful, like bless her soul, I love her so much, and she was with me throughout the time where I was still kind of in and out of being trafficked. And I think it really clicked for me so I have friends who have been trafficked and never speak about it. Like it's something I have friends who have become lawyers who have been trafficked and will never tell anybody about it. I think for me, it was like my children, like, especially because I have 2 daughters. And my oldest, she's very, very smart, and she pays attention, and she loves to eavesdrop. So like anytime that I'm speaking about human trafficking or anything, she's very much in tune about it. And she asks me questions like, how did this happen, or how did that happen? And of course you explain it in an appropriate way to an 8-year-old. But it was that, and the fact that I was so tired of being invalidated by my trafficker. And it took me a very long, because again, like I had mentioned before, that I was still, even though I wasn't explicitly being trafficked at the time when I had moved to Toronto, financial coercion was still a thing. It was still happening. And the emotional breakdown of like, oh, like you're this because I said you were going to be this, and you did this because of this. And I remember I tried to almost explain, like, when you break up with someone, you want to get closure. Like, I tried that, and I explained, like, you did this, and you trafficked me, and this happened. And the response was, like, I understand that that's your version of events.
Oh,
and then it really...
The gaslighting is real.
Yeah, and then it kind of clicked for me. I was like, okay, I was like, I think you're like, there's a little something wrong with you. And
it's giving, I'm gonna ghost you instead.
Yeah. So
no
then,
closure needed.
and then after that,
This
like,
is the closure that I
This is
need.
the closure.
This is the closure.
that's exactly it. And I think too, when I came to York, I met like some of the most amazing people and now who are some of my good friends. And I think like even disclosing my story to them, everyone looked at me and it wasn't like, poor you, Cassandra, you've been through so much. It was like, holy, like you've got a story to tell, you need to tell it to people. So then I started getting more comfortable about sharing my story. And then like in terms of shame, like I definitely do feel a lot of shame because sex trafficking, like when people think about it, they think you wanted to sleep with that guy. And sorry, but no one wants to sleep with a 60-year-old man in a hotel room when you're like 19, 20 years old. So I think like there's definitely still a lot of shame that comes with it. I'm lucky that I've built a really good support system to kind of help me through that process when I do speak about the things that I've gone through. And like even like there's men who have told me like, oh, you have too much baggage, like, oh, you've been through this and you have too many bodies and you've slept with too many people. And then I think about it and I go like, the amount of people that I've slept with that I've actually wanted to sleep with is drastically lower than the amount of people who I did not want to sleep with. But again, like people don't really see, like they don't see that. They don't know what's going on behind the scenes.
And these are really like double standards, to be honest. Like the whole thing with like body count and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's again another episode.
That is a whole
Really?
different thing. But like, what's funny, what's going viral right now, just to like lighten up the mood real quick, just what's going viral right now is Love Island USA. And I have not watched it, but have you guys heard the body counts of those men?
Yeah, like
on there?
200.
Really? Like,
Yeah.
and
Like,
people don't judge it.
it's insane.
Yeah.
That's the
It's
thing.
actually insane.
So that's why like we have something
Like
like
double
a club for women to like really like
Feel safe.
I feel like people know about the whole like double standards for or I hope that they do know about like the double standards for like body count.
Yeah.
But really, like if you don't, okay, like think
Educate
about your
yourself.
think about your attitude.
Learn about it.
Think about your perspective on things. Do a little like introspection. That's something that you should do. It was such a psychology thing to say. I was like a little introspection.
Also,
Go
the
to
fact
therapy.
that they're not considering like what situation might have happened for that to exist, that's very ignorant.
Yeah.
I'm glad
Right.
you're not with any of those men.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think too, that's something like even speaking about my story, I think like I was not put on this world to marry a man and date a man for the rest of my life. Like I was very much put in this world to make a change and make a difference and be my authentic self. So anything that I do, speak about and tell my story, it's not to please a man, I can tell you that. It's more to help other women who have gone through similar circumstances. And I think that, and I was told this, is that any man who would judge you differently based on your past is not someone that you would ever want to be with.
100%. Even friends, yeah.
Yeah.
Even friends.
Because you want people who match your values and your maturity level, and I don't think
Yeah.
this matches it at all.
No,
so,
exactly, yeah.
And
No.
then it's good that you're not surrounding yourself with any of those people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing too is like even like toxic people, and I know like in this generation the whole like toxic relationship thing is like
It's
so
becoming a trend.
it's
It's
it
so
really
disgusting.
is.
It's
It
not
is.
a trend. Like, please. Oh, I'm gonna do it for the plot. No, don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Seriously.
Don't
It's
do
actually
it.
so bad. You know how many people I've met that like they just don't let go of their exes just
Yeah.
because like for fun
Yeah.
too. Like bro, like you
Yeah,
have
no.
so many like other amazing people that you could get with. Like this generation is just
But you know what I
That's true.
think it is too is I
Yeah.
think like a lot of we have a lot of intergenerational trauma. Like I think like especially
attachments and stuff too.
Yeah, I'll say like my generation has a lot of intergenerational trauma, and I think like this whole toxic, this toxic era and everybody loves being toxic, it's very much not good. But I also understand it from the perspective of it's very difficult to feel healthy love. Like after being with someone who's toxic, like I can even speak to it now, like even meeting someone who like gives you healthy love and respects your boundaries and is very aware of like, your emotions and how you feel and like always checking in on you.
Yeah.
It's definitely a very like foreign feeling. So I can understand why people go back to that toxic environment because that's what you're used to. But even something like, as like I said, okay, I'm going out with my friends, and it's like, okay, be safe. I looked at my phone for 10 minutes and I was like, you don't like me, do you? Like, you
don't care about me. You don't want to question, like, anything, like.
But then even, I think I, like, even spoke to you about it. And it's like, no, that's healthy love. Like, that's respecting boundaries. And before I was used to, like, who are you going with? What are you doing? Turn your location on. Like, if I didn't respond in 3 minutes.
I hate controlling.
Yeah.
And it's like protective. But controlling is a different thing.
This is what I always tell my friends. Protective is different from controlling. Because a lot of my friends are like, yeah, like, they like that toxicness. They're like, oh, like, I just like a man who would, like, you know, care. And I'm like, bro, caring does not mean, like, that they're going to, like, tell you what to do and what to wear to go out with. Like, there's a difference between
And the toxic cycle is real. Like, I was telling Cassandra, because I'm the therapist in the, in the group chat. So I was telling her that it's all about, like, this dopamine, like, addiction. That you're just used to, like, this person is just gonna disappear, and then they disappear. So then you're like, oh, I don't have my dopamine anymore. And then they show up, hola, and then you're just like, oh, they're back. So this cycle just keeps going.
I've heard of that thing that they do.
I think that happens a lot in the trafficking as well, probably.
I've heard of that thing that they do where it's like, so they give you the attention that you want, that, like, you think you want and need, and then suddenly they take it away, so you miss it. But as soon as, like, you're starting to, like, realize what's going on, they come back.
So when you have someone who's healthy, who's, like, constantly giving you the attention, you're like,
yeah,
I don't like that. No.
Like, and then, like, the worst part is when you start comparing this healthy thing to the toxic one.
But I think, like, that's very common in human trafficking too, is like the whole, like, the love bombing. Like, they'll love bomb you, they'll buy you a bunch of stuff and they make you feel good, and then they'll take it away. And then you kind of question, like, oh my gosh, did I do something wrong? Like, what's going on? And then you, like, kind of, like, kiss their bum, right? And then try and make up with them, and then they, like, harm you physically, but then they'll say, oh, like, I'm so sorry. So it's really, like, emotional dependence for sure in human trafficking, aside from financial coercion.
Yeah, that word. Yes, financial coercion. It reminds me of your LinkedIn profile. You had, like, a whole
for
thing.
Bill 41?
Bill 41,
yeah. So you probably want to talk about that a little bit?
I think, so the government has this funny way of making it seem like everything they're doing is so great and like it's for the people. And I do get the intention behind Bill 41. So essentially what Bill 41 is it's legislation that was passed through in December of 2023. And it basically means that any human trafficking survivor who has debt because of financial coercion from being trafficked, they won't be responsible for that debt. So the creditor will be contacted, proof will have to be given, and then they remove the debt off of the victim's file.
That's good.
That's great.
Oh.
So the only issue with that is, let's take the CRA, for example. The Canada Revenue Agency, they also have to follow this bill, of course. So during the time that I was being trafficked during COVID. So, of course, CERB came out and everybody's, like, running to get CERB. And, of course, my trafficker at the time, he did fraud. But then again, so this is the thing that I struggle with sometimes is, like, I claimed CERB on my CRA account, but that's because I had someone in the back saying, claim CERB, claim CERB, claim CERB, which happened to be my trafficker.
Right.
So I'm doing this on my phone and I'm, the money's coming in my account. Am I spending it? No. Did I spend some of it? Of course, like, $14,000 at some point went into my bank account. But what I was spending it on wasn't stuff for me. It was because my trafficker was telling me to, to buy X, Y, and Z.
You were basically being forced to.
Yeah. And so I did eventually accumulate, like, a lot of debt with the CRA, which was completely out of my control. So now I'm going through the process with Victim Services and Project Recover to kind of eliminate my debt that I have with the CRA. The only problem with that is they have an investigation process. They don't disclose anything in their investigation process. They don't, tell you, okay, we're going to do this next or we're going to do this. It's very much secretive. It feels like CIA behind the scenes, like something's going on. And then for the last, like, year since COVID ended, that they've started clawing back all of the benefits. Any benefit that I was supposed to get, I'm being deducted. So my tax returns have been taken. The money that I get every month for my children, child tax benefit, that's been taken. So it's like financially, like, I'm still suffering and not being with my trafficker.
And wouldn't, like, the What's the bill?
Bill 41.
That.
Yeah.
I'm in psychology, bro. Don't look at me like that. Wouldn't it help you in this case?
So yeah, so it's that, like, that was the intention, like that's what it's supposed to do. But the problem is during this investigation process, they haven't even offered to speak with me about what has happened. So they look at from a point of view as like, okay, we're gonna look at her file, we're gonna look at every year she's filed taxes, we're gonna look at the debt, you know, maybe we'll get the banks involved to look at the security cameras, like whatever their process is. They're not speaking to me as the survivor, which I think in that type of investigation should be the first step. Like, financial coercion happens in so many different ways, especially when you're being trafficked. It's not like you go to the ATM with a gun behind your head. It's very much financial coercion in different ways. And so the CRA has not offered to speak with me. They haven't contacted me in any way. And we had asked, like, throughout the investigation if I could stop at any time. If they found that I owed more money, could they take the lesser amount because I was being trafficked at the time? And they said they can't guarantee any of those. So they can't guarantee that I can stop the investigation. And then in the end, if they determine that I do owe the money, I have to pay all of that back.
Not the other person.
Even though you were basically forced to.
And then, but that's what I'm saying is, like, there's a very large gap because these people are not trauma informed. They do not know how, you know, financial coercion happens when you're being trafficked. So I think to have somebody behind a screen just look at numbers, that's your job. You're an accountant. You look at numbers and you determine, you know, the result, but you don't know how financial coercion really works. So to me, I'm kind of stuck in limbo. I'm like, how do you guys determine whether or not I was trafficked?
When you're not even talking to me.
You know, and like I do have Project Recover who's acting as an advocate on my behalf. But again, like it gets to the point where you really are tired of people telling your story for you and you want to say it yourself. But that's like something that's very big in the human trafficking world right now is like, I mean, I saw a conference, and I'm not going to name the university, but I saw a conference from a student union at another university, and majority of their panelists are not victims or survivors of human trafficking. It was,
but they were speaking on it?
Yes, and I get that. Like, you go to school, you know, you do your studies, and you know, you work in the social service field, and you start to learn all of these things. But it's like
representation.
It's very, very hard as a survivor to see people talk about sex trafficking and have no experience in it whatsoever, and then not even offer to bring a survivor along.
Right. No, that's just unfair. Yeah.
So that just brings me to, as you were a victim that was forced into this, that just brings me into a question, like what advice you would give, or do you think there are any sort of legal policies or reforms that could make the situation for the victims better, or that they could enforce for it to become better?
I think like we definitely need, we need people to be more trauma informed, like police officers, and like government officials who are dealing directly with human trafficking survivors. But I think like let survivors speak on their own, like let them tell their story. And, you know, I have friends again who haven't spoken about their story and don't want to. And I think that's fine. You don't ever have to share what had happened to you. But I also think when there's people who are willing to share their story, like you need to let them. And like I know a few, you know, human trafficking advocates who were on a news channel, and one of them had asked one of the news channel, they had asked if they could bring a survivor, and they said no.
Oh.
So it's kind of like,
like, okay.
Like, you know, and I think because like for myself, like I'm not the face of human trafficking, right? So no one really knows about my story. But and there are people who are, you know, the faces of sex trafficking, but have not actually been trafficked. So you run into that issue. But I think like definitely, you know, policymakers, like we need to have more awareness on human trafficking, and not because it's a trend, but because it's like really a huge thing that's happening. And I noticed like when that movie came out, human trafficking just became a trend.
That's insane. And yeah, no, I think I agree with you, because I feel like personally, as I told you, I think I commented that on your LinkedIn post actually, because I was like, I did not know about, because, you know, I don't have to be in law, or I don't have to be involved in a specific thing to know about big issues like this. Like, I don't have to have Cassandra Harvey connect with her
Mm-hmm.
on
On
LinkedIn
Cassandra Harvey.
to be able to know that like, oh, there's this bill and or there's that happening. Like I should know this in general because that's important and it's happening.
And like honestly, I feel like I went through that phase after exiting of being trafficked where I kind of hated everybody, and I hated, primarily social children's aid workers, because when I started being trafficked, I was still very much a part of children's aid because I was a child, like I was very young. And I went through this phase of hating the world and being so angry at everybody around me for not knowing what was happening to me, or knowing and then not doing anything about it. But I think I started to so I didn't actually know that I was being trafficked. Like and for me to like get angry at other people who don't know, I feel is very hypocritical, because I didn't even know myself when I was in the situation. It really took me meeting Kelly Beal, who I'd spoken about before, and Cassandra Diamond from Bridgenorth, which is a human trafficking organization. I remember meeting with them, and they had both told me, like, explain, like, if you're comfortable, tell us your story. You don't have, the police were also there, and they said you don't have to make a formal police report, because I wasn't sure, like, I didn't know what had happened to me. And so I basically just said my story. I said, like, this happened, and, now I'm here, and what do I do? And they all looked at me and they said, you've been sex trafficked, for 3 or 4 years. Like, this was your life. You were sex trafficked. And then I was like, I wasn't kidnapped on the side of the street, like it wasn't like a movie. And then that's when it kind of hit that, like, how can I, get angry at other people for not knowing if I didn't know myself?
Right. Especially as you said, like, it becomes a trend
Mm-hmm.
with, like, the emotions as well, and, like, relationships that, like, oh, let's say, I don't know, like, some guy just comes and picks you up from home, and people are seeing that. They're like, oh, this is probably her boyfriend. He's a little bit weird, but he's fine. He takes care of her. He brings her stuff. But really, it's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
This is so heavy.
Yeah, it is.
We predicted that for this
Yes,
topic.
definitely.
Yeah.
Wait, I'm wondering, can you actually? That's like a improvised question, so you don't have to answer if you don't want to.
Yeah.
But like, how do you know the difference between someone who's like just really nice to you, and someone who's like trafficking
Gaslighting you?
Yeah, because like you know
like
how
authentically.
because you know how, like, for example, some people could, because I know you mentioned, like, sometimes they give you, like, lots of gifts.
Yeah.
So, like, what if my love language is just, like, gift giving?
No,
And, like, no, I'm being
is
serious. Like, what if
Yeah.
I'm just, like, someone who just loves to give gifts? How do I know, or how do I draw the line that, like, oh, this person is actually, like, gonna ask me, like
I think it's the moments that they give you gifts, and like when they stop giving you gifts and when they start giving you gifts, right? Because like one of my love languages is also gift giving, right? So obviously I'll let you answer that question, but one of my love languages is also gift giving, right? So like I could be seeing something and be like, oh my god, this reminds me of Susu or Cass, let me like buy this for them, like that's so cute, right? Like also it's like the meaning behind the gift, and also like the timings of the gift, and also like am I doing other stuff, like we're good friends, right? So like am I just like giving you gifts and asking for something in exchange? Like you know what, that's like, yeah, exactly, that's like the biggest thing, like from a man in a relationship, since we talked about like toxic relationships, like I've seen so many times like when men expect something in return, if they like buy you an expensive dinner,
I got
or
you
like
a flower, you
like get out get out right now. Like I feel like that's how you can, like, for gift giving, that's how like you can
But I think like for me, so I still struggle to this day to know whether someone's being authentic or love bombing me. But I think, like, because I grew up not knowing what love is, like, I always experienced, even from my mom, like, the love that I always experienced was abusive. So when I had met, my trafficker, I thought that was love, So, like, it would get to the point where, like, I was being promised, like, oh, I'll buy you designer and I'll do these things. But, like, then he'll, like, beat me up and then not give me the stuff, So it's, like, it's very much, like, you don't really know, like, when someone is being authentic. And even now I'm trying to learn, that healthy love, what those cues are. And like I tell people, like, don't buy me gifts, like don't buy me anything, like just be authentic with me and care for me as your friend, because that's really what I what I focus on.
It is a very scary thing, Because then, like, I've also heard a lot about, like, people just, like, becoming friends with people or becoming, like, going into relationships with people, and, like, they don't actually know what type of people they are because they're good at masking themselves, too, or, like, the gaslighting thing, until they're in, like, the friendships or they're in the relationship, which is also, I feel like, another reason why it's so hard to, like, be able to tell the difference between, like, somebody who's being genuine about, like, their love for you than somebody who is not.
Right. Yeah,
but it's okay, Susu.
You're
good.
You're
good. Yeah, you're good. You're good.
That's a good question.
Okay, you're good.
Yeah, so I guess that kind of wraps up our time. I just looked at the time. That was really mom looking.
It passed by so fast.
It did.
Is there
Should
anything else?
Should we just end it on a lighter mode and just be like, from your experience, what would you say, like, any success stories or, like, good strategies that might have, like, helped
look at
you?
you now. Like, the transition is crazy, actually.
Yeah,
like,
we're like, that might have, like, helped you.
Knock on wood.
Help me. Okay, so Bridge North, the human trafficking organization, had a huge impact on my life, and when I was exiting, they really did help me. And I would say, like, having a really good support system and therapy. I cannot stress therapy enough. Like, I used to be like
believe in therapy.
I used to be so anti-therapy. I was like, I'm not going to sit there and tell someone all my problems. You know, but that was my mindset before.
Like, some people are like, I've heard people telling me, like, oh, I went to therapy, and I'm like, okay, how was it? It was like, they were like, oh, they just repeated all the stuff I know about myself, and I'm like,
that's not what therapy is about. Please,
no. So, like,
see me in 2 years, please. Thank you. Like,
therapy definitely helps, and it took me a really long time to meet people who kind of understand me and who are empathetic, and building a really good support system also helps. And I think, like, becoming confident, like, that's one thing. Like, I struggled, with body image for, like, and I still do, and it was something that, like, it took me a while to kind of get used to. But I think, like, just a support system and school has really helped me too, like, kind of, invest my time into something that I feel is going to benefit me in the future. And in terms of success, like, I mean, how many years? 5 years, and I'll be a lawyer. So, like, maybe I'll come back in 5 years and we'll see the success.
You've already come a long way, and it's possible for people out there watching this.
It is, yeah, it very much is. I feel like I definitely came from the bottom, so yeah, people can do it. It's possible.
You can do it.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, with that being said, that wraps up our conversation with Cassandra and our topic today and our episode. And
very insightful.
Yeah,
me too. We're on conclusions, man.
How do you feel?
This is giving awkward.
You feel good?
I feel good. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we were very happy to have you.
Yeah.
It was a great episode. And yeah, we'll see you guys again in another episode of Lady Justice Talks.
Bye bye.
Stay tuned for now.